All power in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always until the end of the age. These words of Jesus, known as the Great Commission, are central to the church because they so clearly state her mission to evangelize, to go out to the world and proclaim the good news of the gospel. Even more, Matthew ends his book, he ends his entire gospel with those words of tremendous consolation. Behold, I am with you always, even until the end of the world. Who could ask for anything more? Well, there is one phrase here that kind of stands out in the gospel. Listen again carefully to the beginning. The 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain to which Jesus had ordered them. When they saw him, they worshipped, but they doubted. I mean, what does that mean, they doubted? These are the 11. Okay? These are the apostles. These are the ones who were eyewitnesses to the miracles. If you count them, there are 37 miracles in the Gospels performed by Jesus that are recorded in the Gospels. But John goes and ends his Gospel with the words, there are also many other things that Jesus did, but if these were to be described individually, I do not think the whole world could contain the books that would be written. I mean, the apostles witnessed countless healings and exorcisms. They witnessed the multiplication of the loaves and the fish. They saw the lame walk. They saw the blind gain their sight. They saw the calming of a raging sea. They saw the dead brought back to life. They saw the resurrected Jesus. The list goes on and on. All of these things happened at Jesus' command. And yet, they doubted. Why would Matthew even put these embarrassing words into his gospel? Now, all right, there is a potential translation issue here. Some Bibles translate this. They say this phrase could be translated, but some doubt. Some doubt. And even so, that would indicate a divided response among the apostles themselves, with some believing, others are holding back, at least initially. Either way, Matthew, under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, did include these embarrassing words in his gospel. So the question for us is, as always, what is God trying to tell us? You know, I had a good friend that passed away not too long ago. He was a holy and devout Catholic man. Someone who not only practiced his faith and took it very seriously, but he did his best to study and understand that faith. And we were very close. We would confide in each other. We trusted each other. We could ask each other anything. And I once asked him, do you ever have doubts about whether all of this stuff is true? And his response was immediate. He said yes, several times a day. That dreaded word doubt. Let's talk about doubt. Because I think for most of us, doubt is a 4-letter word. Don't answer this question, but if I were to ask you, do you ever have doubts about your faith? How would you answer? Maybe more to the point. Are there times when you ask yourself that very question? Perhaps in times of great difficulty or suffering. In those secret recesses of your soul. Do you ever sometimes wonder if the faith that we profess is really true? If your answer to this question is yes, welcome to the human race. Doubt is undoubtedly a temptation against faith. And when they happen, I'm sure you're even embarrassed that you could have in your head such horrible thoughts. Like all temptations, it's an attack on our fallen human nature called original sin. But even if and when doubts occur, when properly channeled, they can lead to faith. Let me give you a few examples. Back in December 1979, Mother Teresa, Saint Teresa of Calcutta, went to Oslo, Norway to receive the Nobel Peace Prize. Since it was December, close to Christmas, she reminded everyone in her acceptance speech to radiate joy. She said in part, and I quote, "Christ is everywhere. Christ is in our hearts. Christ is in the poor we meet. Christ is in the smile we give and in the smile that we receive." Such beautiful words. Yet, less than 3 months earlier, in a letter to her spiritual director, she wrote very different words. She wrote, and again I quote, "Jesus has a very special love for you. As for me, the silence and the emptiness is so great that I look and I do not see. I listen and I do not hear. The tongue moves in prayer but does not speak. I want you to pray for me." She went on to say in other letters to her spiritual director, in confidence to her spiritual director, that for most of her adult life, she felt no presence of God whatsoever. Did the great Saint Teresa of Calcutta have doubts about her faith? It sure sounds that way. Did she let those doubts interfere with her great work? Not at all. Was she embarrassed? Was she ashamed of those doubts? Absolutely. In fact, she wanted those letters to her spiritual director destroyed upon her death. But the church overruled her wishes. Why? Because the church recognized how important, very important, indeed crucial it is for us to hear about the doubts, the uncertainties of someone who is undoubtedly one of the greatest saints of the 20th century. You can read those letters in a book published after her death, Mother Teresa, Come Be My Light, the private writings of the Saint of Calcutta. You can read here in these letters how Mother Teresa, Saint Teresa of Calcutta, describes the utter desolation, darkness, and doubts that she experienced throughout her life. It was St. John of the Cross who coined the term the dark night of the soul, describing his experiences with doubts and fears that not only entered his mind, but even overwhelmed him. Saint Therese of Lisieux, the little flower, she is the patron saint of missionaries. She was named a doctor of the church by Pope St. John Paul II in 1997. She acknowledged before her death that not one day had ever passed without a struggle with doubt. In fact, on her deathbed, she shocked the sisters in her convent by telling them, and again I quote, "I am assailed by the worst temptations of atheism." Atheism. A sister tried to console her as she neared death, saying, "You must be so happy. You're soon going to see Jesus." And her response, the little flower's response, was, "All I see is darkness." Saint Therese of Lisieux, Saint John of the Cross, Saint Teresa of Calcutta. The list goes on and on of great saints who have experienced great doubts. But a saint is one who would not let those doubts have the last word, but rather use them to grow even stronger in faith. I know many of these stories sound shocking to many, but to touch the inner life of a great saint is a shocking experience. In fact, the greater the saint, the greater their holiness, the greater their doubts and struggles with the faith. Because of her struggles, because of her doubts, Saint Teresa of Calcutta will be remembered not only for her ministry to the poor, but also for the ways that she helped people, others who experienced doubt and the absence of God in their lives. And you know who those people are? Everybody. Everybody at some point in their life. There is one thing of which we can all be sure, and that is that at some point, doubt and uncertainty will enter our minds, without a doubt. The question is, what do we do about it? Like everything else, it comes down to a choice. We are created as rational beings who can think and choose. We can let doubt lead to unbelief and despair, as it does for so many people today, or we can let it lead to greater faith, as it has done for the saints. It's our choice. It's up to us. Doubt is often where true faith begins. What is faith? Faith, well, the letter to the Hebrews gives us its definition of faith. It says, Faith is the realization of what is hoped for and evidence of things not seen. But to say faith is the realization of what is hoped for means that hope is already present within us. I think it's safe to say that every one of us here today hopes that what we claim to believe is true. And because that hope is already present within us, it provides that evidence of things not seen. And I love the way Pope Benedict XVI put it. He wrote this while he was still Cardinal Ratzinger. But he said, however strongly unbelief may feel justified, it cannot forget the eerie feeling induced by the words, perhaps it is true. Perhaps it is true. That is the seed of faith present in us, a seed planted by God, a seed of faith that leads us out of doubt and into hope. And this is where grace enters the picture, because first and foremost, our faith is a gift. And that gift will either smother the doubts or allow us to live with them just like it did for the greatest of saints. It's all about faith, and it's all up to us. Faith is what it's all about. Again, Saint Therese of Lisieux, the little flower, said, and I quote, "If I did not have any faith, I would have inflicted death on myself without a moment's hesitation." I'm sure that there is not one person here today who would not welcome a visit from the afterlife, from their sainted grandmother or whoever, and for them to tell you, it's all true, it's better than you could have imagined, hang in there, just hang in there, it's all true. But that's not likely to happen. Why? Because if it did, it would cheapen the greatest gift we have been given, the gift of our faith. It is by faith that we make an act of the will that boldly says, I believe, despite any doubts or uncertainties. Even the apostles were assailed by doubts. That's why the Holy Spirit had Matthew include those embarrassing words. For these first-hand eyewitnesses, it was their faith that mattered the most, not what they saw. A faith that not only carried them beyond their human doubts, but also gave them superhuman strength and courage to sacrifice even their lives for that faith. The closing words of Matthew's Gospel, the closing words of today's Gospel, I am with you always until the end of the age. They echo the very beginning of Matthew's Gospel, where it is said of Jesus, he is to be called Emmanuel. God is with us. Faith is not a promise of a life free of doubts and uncertainties and darkness, but a promise that we are not alone. God is with us, and if we let him, he will guide us past any doubts, any uncertainties, even through the darkest night of the soul, to a place where all doubts, all uncertainties, all darkness is forever destroyed.